one thing which I say is a gift and apply for me is that I'm always known as young Selby or Selby Wilson's son, you know what I'm saying? But it's definitely a gift in the sense that as my father, he's highly respected. Nobody respects him more than me, I'll tell you that much.
He's a survivor, and he works hard at whatever you give him to do.
A tenacious and comported gentleman, Selby Oswald Wilson, a father of two, was born on February 15, 1940. He attended the Point Fortin Intermediate Roman Catholic School, graduated to St. Mary's College, and went on to the Southwest London College of Commerce. Selby is a fellow of the Certified Chartered Association of Accountants.
I had a glorious sum of $6,000 in the bank account. I completed my first year under very interesting circumstances. I told the welfare officer at the school I went to that I could only afford very simple and inexpensive accommodation. So she got me a place at City Council's home for old men. So I spent my first year in a home for retired men provided by the City Council. And that in itself was a very interesting experience because there were no students there. I was the only student. But it was reasonable. I paid £2.10 a week for meals and lodging. And I eventually got a room of my own. It was under a staircase, but it was a room by itself. And I lived there for a year. So that's how I've been molded. I kept going in England by doing summer jobs. Worked in the post office, worked on the train line. One time I was washing motor cars. I got £2 for every car I washed. And I learned something about the British then. If they came to buy a used car, they were interested in whether it was clean. They weren't half as interested as to the mechanical soundness of the car. But it must be clean. The engine must look clean, the inside must look clean. So that's what I did to sustain myself.
During the year 1968 to 1969, Selby worked as a taxation audit supervisor in the Ministry of Finance and then at Trinidad and Tobago Telephone Company Limited from 1969 to 1981, serving firstly as Assistant Finance Controller and moving on to the portfolio of General Manager.
Truthfully, I had no political ambitions. At the time, I didn't even belong to a political party. I was approached by Mr. Pantin, Clive Pantin. I remember it was in the month of August. I had a bad back. I was lying at home on the floor and the phone rang. It was Clive Pantin on the other line. And he said he'd like to come to see me to discuss something. He'd never visited me before, and I knew of Clive Pantin. And I said, fine. And he came, and he said to me, we would like you to consider running for Point Fortin. And I said, well, why me? I don't even belong to the party. He said, because we feel you're a good man. And we're looking for somebody in Point Fortin. And the people in Point Fortin have identified that you could potentially be a candidate. Would you go and talk to them? And I said yes. And then my childhood friends from Point Fortin started calling me. They wanted me to come to Point to talk with them. I went, I chatted, they grilled me, we spoke about the issues, we spoke about what Point is doing. They persuaded me literally that I had a responsibility to give back something to Point Fortin.
That was a critical time for Trinidad and Tobago politics. You have to remember that the PNM was in power for a long time, and this was the first time that a different party had formed the government. So the NAR, headed by Mr. Robinson, formed the government, and Selby was one of the candidates for Point Fortin and became one of the ministers of finance. When Robinson first assumed office, he was the Minister of Finance, and he had Trevor Sudama and Selby as ministers in the Ministry of Finance. eventually Sudama dropped off the scene and Mr. Robinson became Prime Minister only, and therefore Selby assumed the full responsibility for the Ministry of Finance. And therefore he was able to make a significant contribution. As I told you, we were reforming the taxation system at that time, and Selby, because of his understanding, was able to do a very good job.
From January 1987 to November 1991, Selby Wilson represented the constituency of Point Fortin on the platform of the National Alliance for Reconstruction. He was appointed minister in the Ministry of Finance and the Economy.
It was an interesting period in my life, that short campaign, in that friends of mine surfaced from all over Trinidad to come to Point to assist, work, and contribute to the campaign. Other Point Forte persons who had migrated to Port of Spain or working in Tobago or wherever just appeared. Harry Lee Gall, Bob Gopi, all these guys just came down. They were excited and willing to help, and we put a team together, and I was the first candidate to defeat the PNM in Point Forte. And that was a fantastic feeling.
Okay.
And I think the people in Point Forte up to today will still acknowledge. Some people say that in my period of stewardship as a representative of Point Forte, they got more from me than they got from the PNM in the 25 years prior to my entry into politics. I remember that after the election, I came into town. I was living in Port of Spain. I came into town to get a change of clothes, and as I arrived back in Point Forte, I had a call from Mr. Robinson, who said he wanted to see me immediately. So I literally had to jump in my car and turn around and drive back into Port of Spain to see Mr. Robinson. And the conversation we had was, well, Selby, would you like to be in government on a full-time basis? And I said to him, yes, I would give consideration to that. I figured once I had that opportunity to serve in government on a full-time basis, I will do it. And I said to him, yes, I will consider it, but I don't want TNTEC, I don't want WASA, I don't want TSTT. At the time it was Telco. I said, and the simple reason I didn't want it, I had 14 years in the utility business.
When he became a Minister of Finance, one of the earlier functions he had to do was to reform the taxation system of Trinidad and Tobago. And with his background from Inland Revenue and also my background from Inland Revenue, we were able to pull it off. We introduced the value-added tax system in Trinidad and Tobago and reformed the whole income tax system.
I had a hands-on appreciation of what was in the budget. If you go back to the newspaper stories, they'd always say that the man who knows about this thing was the Minister and the Minister of Finance. Robinson did the initial presentation, all the public appearances, all the radio broadcasts. I had to face it. I had to answer the questions. I faced the press. I was the face of the government on every single budget.
It was a very tight situation. As a matter of fact, when Mr. Robinson inherited the government, the economy was at a very low ebb. We were in structural adjustment programs. We had gone to the IMF for assistance. And Selby was very valuable in doing that. He negotiated with the IMF to try to get better terms and conditions for Trinidad and Tobago. He also negotiated with the Paris Club and got some of our outstanding debt renegotiated and reduced. So it was a very difficult situation at that point in time. And Selby, I would say, rose to the occasion because I would say he had a very successful tenure as a Minister of Finance.
My father is not a rich man, he's an honest one. That's why he's still revered right now. Years or decades after his tenure.
A very human person, understands human frailties and so on, but also very committed to whatever he's supposed to be doing.
As Minister of Finance, I became Minister of Finance in 1989. But as I said to you before, I was doing the work from 1986, and therefore I was hands-on. And I think if when I reflect on it, our work in the Ministry of Finance at the time and condition of the economy, our economy in shambles in 1986. Regardless of what people might think, that we had no right to go to the IMF, we had no alternative. We had to get resources. We had to restructure the nature of government fiscal operations. We had contractors who were not being paid by the government in a timely fashion. We had even some contractors who went belly up because of tardy payments from the government. So our circumstances were very difficult. And I think it is a credit that we were able to enter into an IMF program in I think it was in 1987 or 1988. And we were out of the program in 3 years. That has not happened in many countries. I didn't know anything about the IMF when I joined as Minister of Finance. I think I learned quickly. I understood the issues quickly. I got a grasp of the economics very quickly. And I think a lot of that credit must go to the public servants. I had tremendous confidence in the guys I worked with as public servants. I listened to their advice. I questioned their advice. But at the end of the day, resolve the issues.
Integrity. That's one thing he's always say. Have integrity. Be true to yourself, be true to other people.
We were honest men. Simple. We did the work that we had to do. And some people would facetiously say we had no money to thief. But I will tell them that you get the most corruption in poor countries. If you look at Haiti, part of Haiti's problem is a corruption problem. So it isn't whether you have money or not, it's whether what's your integrity. And I would say that we could not desire a person of higher integrity than A.N.R. Robinson to lead what was relatively a young group of new parliamentarians. And I think he influenced how our deportment and how we behaved in public life. Under Robinson's stewardship, we had a code for parliamentarians. We had to register every gift that we got with the Prime Minister's office, right? So Robinson had put certain structures in place that allowed us and encouraged us to behave in a particular manner. And I don't think any of the other administrations, certainly haven't followed through on those things that we had put in place, because they were not written in law. They were just a code of practice from the Prime Minister's office. We have a register of gifts. We had a code of how to behave, and periodically he would counsel us on how to handle the situations. And I think that is a significant difference. The government takes its tone from the leader.
Firmly rooted in his principles, Selby Wilson continues to serve the people of Trinidad and Tobago. He believes that the provision of equal opportunity is the essence of a nation's unity.
I think he always reached out to people and understood their needs and requirements.
The name Selby Wilson, synonymous with hard work, organization, care, you're a caring person. He's one of the few politicians, when you call his name, somebody don't start complaining, and that says a lot. That says everything, actually.